Hey listeners, welcome back to Infinite Podcast, the show where no topic is too big or too small. I'm your host diving in today with my ace co-host Simon and our global adventure for the perfect bean. From the mountaintops of Colombia to the sun-bathed fields of Ethiopia, we're searching every nook and cranny. Simon, this bean quest, are you thinking magic beans or just a killer cup of coffee?
Magic beans? If they shoot up a vine to a golden goose, sign me up. Otherwise, I'm all in for that ace cup of Java. Imagine sipping on a brew so smooth it feels like gliding on buttered skates. That's the dream.
Butter smooth, sure, but here's a thought. Do we really want smooth? Sometimes that gritty kick, that punch in the palate, truly wakes you up. Plus, isn't there charm in the chase? If we find this perfect bean, what's next? The adventure might just end, and where's the fun in that?
You hit a nerve there, Joe. Smooth is nice, but where's the character? It's like life, right? Too smooth, and it's snooze city. The gritty kick, it's the alarm clock of flavors. And about the charm in the chase, you bet. The perfect bean is like Bigfoot, fun to hunt, but do we actually want to find him? No way. Let's keep that quest going. Besides, Bigfoot might brew a mean espresso.
You know, Simon, I once drove across Guatemala, right through the heartland of their coffee region. After hours on rough roads, we stopped at this little roadside stand, and this old guy served us coffee. Simple, unassuming setup. That cup, it was complex, vibrant, almost like a slap to the senses in the best possible way. It taught me that sometimes perfection isn't what we think it should be. It's about the surprise and the story behind each cup.
So, you're telling me, Joe, in the middle of nowhere Guatemala, this old timer just karate chops your taste buds with bean juice? I bet he's the undercover coffee ninja, guarding the sacred perfect bean. Makes you wonder what his secret is. Ancient technique or just not cleaning the pot for a century?
Ha! Not cleaning the pot might just be a moldy disaster, not a secret, Simon. But let's flip the bean here. Who says it's about the beans alone? Maybe it's also in the ritual, the hands that craft your brew. This coffee ninja knew his stuff, years mastering a process, or perhaps just using plain old intuition instead of high-tech roasters and fancy gadgets. That's valid because sometimes tradition trumps technology. It's about the human touch. And maybe that's where we're all missing the point on our quest.
Ritual, schmeatual, Joe. You sure it wasn't just the magic of travel jazzing up your taste buds? I mean, slap a scenic view on anything and poof, it's gourmet. While you're romancing handcrafted tradition, I'll take my chances with a gadget that could plot a course to Mars, if it promises coffee that makes my socks roll up and down on their own, mind you. Human touch is nice, but why not have both? Our perfect bean quest, a mix of old school wisdom and space-age tech. Keeps it spicy.
Fair enough. Tech brings consistency and precision. But let's not discount the old school vibe too quick. Imagine this. A global cafe trip where each stop is its own unique world of flavor, each cup carrying the essence of tradition with that human touch, but also served with an option to dial in your preferences through some app-connected, AI-driven espresso machine. It's a blend of worlds, honoring the past but embracing the future. Keeps everyone on their toes, right?
I'm all for techie toys, Joe, but dialing in my coffee preferences on an app feels like ordering fast food. Where's the chaos of discovery? The shake-up where you stumble upon some mind-blowing blend because someone misheard your order? We talk about a global cafe trip. Let's not sanitize the adventure out of it with too much control. Dive into the mess. Maybe our perfect bean is hiding in a cup we never thought to order. Now that keeps things interesting, and trust me, far from toe-stepping boredom.
You're hitting something here, man. It's like mixed martial arts. The beauty's in the unexpected combo, that surprise left hook nobody saw coming. You plan too much, you lose the spontaneity. Maybe we let the world throw us those wild coffee punches. Embrace the chaos. It's living life on the edge of your seat, or the edge of your cup in this case. That's where you find the gold, or the perfect bean, in our quest.
Chaos is the secret ingredient. Let's get our bean brawl on.
Bean brawl, love that. To finding chaos in a cup.
To chaos and coffee clinks, Joe. Bring on the brawl.
Guess you could say we're not just spilling the beans here. We're tossing them in the ring for a full-on coffee kerfuffle. Don't bean count us out just yet.
With all this bean chucking, Joe, I'm just waiting for the bean weight champion of the world, pouring knockout espressos left and right. Just as long as no one throws a bean in my face, I've got an image to maintain.
Watch out for those flying beans. Gotta protect that rep.
The global hunt for the perfect bean isn't just about sampling coffee. It's about culture, ecology, and economics too. Take Ethiopia, where Arabica coffee originated. It's got like thousands of varieties. Each region has its own flavor profile due to the soil, altitude, and climate. Those little beans carry centuries of tradition. Then there's Brazil, a coffee giant that basically runs on Java. High-tech farming out there versus small-scale passion projects elsewhere. It's a world of contrast. This quest, it's an endless journey through a mug that overflows with history and heart, Joe. Keep your lid on tight.
Buckle up. We're diving deep into the world in a cup.
Caffeinated World Tour. Here we come. Mugs and passports ready.
Let's do it. Passports in one hand, mugs in the other.
Sure thing, Joe. Buckle up, because the world of coffee is one endless odyssey. Did you know coffee is actually the second most traded commodity after crude oil? Those little beans fuel economies and connect cultures. And flavors, man, they're as diverse as the places they come from. Like take Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. It's known for its bright acidity and floral notes. Or the Sumatra Mandeling from Indonesia, earthy, full-bodied. It's incredible how terrain, climate, and cultivation methods spell out a story in every sip. Plus, sustainable practices are key now. We're talking direct trade and shade-grown ethical goodness. We've got our work cut out for us, buddy. A planet's worth of brews to brave.
Sustainable, diverse, every sip's a journey. Let's taste that narrative.
Let's sip into sustainability, Joe. Cheers to Coffee Tales.
To being conscientious, a toast to that.
All right, Joe. Being conscientious is fine and dandy, but let's stir the pot. Everyone's after that mythical perfect bean, right? But here's a curveball. Does it even exist? Or are we all just chasing Java rainbows? I mean, taste is subjective. Your perfect bean might be my over-roasted nightmare. And another thing, in this quest for the best, are we overlooking the unsung heroes of the coffee crop, the so-called average beans that might just make a cup that tastes like home? Let's not count out the underdog beans on our global taste test adventures.
Perfect bean's a myth. There's magic in the average.
Joe, this perfect bean hype is setting us up for the impossible. Magic's in the mug of the beholder, if you ask me. I've savored cups from roadside stands that nailed it. No bells, no whistles, just darn good brew. Celebrate the diversity, sure, but let's not get so hung up on perfection that we miss out on the joy of discovery. That middle-of-the-road bean from a small family farm could be the unsung hero of tomorrow's wake-up ritual.
The perfect bean hunt. It's overhyped. Satisfaction lies in the random roadside sip, not just the prize beans.
Exactly. Sometimes a simple cuppa is all the perfection you need.
However, chasing the perfect bean pushes innovation and variety. Perfection may be unreachable, but striving for it elevates the whole coffee scene. Better farming methods, richer flavors, new experiences. Isn't that worth the chase?
The chase sparks progress, point taken, but let's not obsess.
Absolutely, we can champion progress without being monomaniacal about it. And speaking of the global adventure, how much are we missing by laser focusing on finding this holy grail of beans? Could our obsession be blinding us to otherwise great blends? There's a whole spectrum of coffee experiences waiting to be discovered if we just take off those bean-colored glasses once in a while. The perfect adventure is in exploration, not just the destination.
Amen to that. Exploration over destination, every single time.
Exploration is key, man. It's like any adventure in life. It's about the journey, not just that final payoff. You gotta enjoy every part of it, the highs and the lows, because that's where you find the real gems, whether it's coffee, martial arts, or life itself.
The real gems are indeed in the journey, Joe. Spot on.
You're right about finding gems, Simon, but isn't there danger in romanticizing the journey? Not every rough path leads to treasure. Plenty end up at dead ends. That's just life. And with coffee, for every hidden gem of a bean, there are countless others that are just meh. Sometimes you need to sift through a lot of chaff to get to the good stuff. Isn't there value, too, in refining what we have, honing in on quality over quantity?
For sure, not every bean's a winner, but diving into the quirky world of coffee competitions is wild. You see some folks turning espresso making into an extreme sport, flipping portafilters like they're in a circus. It's a real spectacle, kind of like those shows where people decorate cakes against the clock, but here they're frothing milk into microfoam masterpieces. The pressure's on to find the best beans, but also to work magic with what you've got. In the end, it's that combo of skill and thrill that makes these contests such a hoot.
The skill and thrill combo really is what it's all about. It's the barista's artistry, the dance of pressure and precision that gives those competitions their kick, not just the bean quality. Life's like that too, right? The raw talent combined with a bit of pressure can turn the ordinary into something extraordinary. Speaking of talents and spectacle, let's jump into the espresso extravaganza. Coffee competitions have their quirks for sure. Competitors take their craft to Olympic levels. But isn't it wild how seriously people take this stuff? We're talking detailed scoring systems, intense training regimens, like it's the World Cup of coffee making. What do you think? Has espresso turned from a morning jolt into competitive art form?
So, Joe, do you think this intensity around espresso competitions is maybe fueling a coffee culture that's more about performance art than just enjoying a good cup?
Espresso competitions have indeed escalated into performance art. Originating from Italian espresso bars, the craft has always had an element of showmanship. Now, with events like the World Barista Championship, it's more pronounced. Baristas showcase their skills in espresso preparation, latte art, and even their knowledge of coffee. Judges score on taste, presentation, creativity, and technical skills. This focus on spectacle definitely elevates barista technique, but you're right, Simon, it could overshadow the simple joy of sipping a well-made espresso.
Joe, these espresso extravaganzas are like barista boot camps. You've got folks who can probably make a cappuccino while sleepwalking or knock out latte art blindfolded. Sure, it's impressive, like turning into coffee ninjas, but sometimes I just want to tell them, hey, lighten up, will ya? It's coffee, not rocket science. It's wild, though. I bet if aliens landed and popped into one of these competitions first thing, they'd think we worship coffee. Maybe they'd even join in. Multi-tentacled latte art. Now that's a showstopper.
You're not wrong about the coffee ninja vibe. And if aliens did drop in, they'd probably mistake a barista for Earth's leader. Take me to your grinder. Imagine them trying to understand our world through these espresso shenanigans. Our universal language might just become single origin with notes of intergalactic peace. Now that's an extraterrestrial espresso experience worth broadcasting.
Take me to your grinder. That's the real universal greeting.
Last summer, I had a chance to attend this boutique coffee festival downtown. Picture it, a catwalk for caffeine. At the heart of it was an espresso-making marathon. One competitor, I'll never forget, she had this vintage hand-cranked grinder. Halfway through her performance, that old relic gets jammed. You could see the panic in her eyes, right? But instead of giving up, she turns it into a comedy show. Cracks jokes, engages the crowd. We were all howling with laughter. When she finally served her coffee, the audience gave her a standing ovation, not just for the espresso, but for turning a hiccup into a highlight. And here's the thing, while everyone sipped on her brew, they chatted, shared stories. It was no longer about the stiff competition, but about human connection. And isn't that what coffee culture should be at its best? Bringing people together over a good cup. That's the essence, competition or not.
A brew to bond us, comedy included.
Exactly. That's the real magic in a mug, Simon.
So do you think that kind of authentic moment, turning a mishap into a communal laugh, is what really draws people into coffee culture more than just the drinks themselves?
Absolutely, Simon. It's those unscripted moments, the mishaps turned into memories, that bring depth to any culture, coffee included. When a barista turns a jammed grinder into a joke, it's a shared experience that people remember and talk about way after they've finished their cup. Sure, we all love a meticulously crafted espresso, but it's the stories that happen around the coffee machines and cafe tables that forge that strong bond. Community is the heart of coffee culture, not just the perfection of the pour.
It's all about the people, not just the perfect pour.
Nailed it, Simon. People over perfection every time.
Human connection for the win, not just the fancy foam.
Absolutely, Simon. Coffee culture hails from a rich tradition of community and conversation. Espresso itself has roots in 20th century Italy, where it became a cornerstone of social life, fostering connection in bustling cafes. Fast forward to today's barista competitions, they're extensions of this culture on a whole new level. It's about supreme skill and showmanship, sure, but at the heart, these events celebrate the bean that brings us together. Whether you're geeking out over extraction techniques or just enjoying the atmosphere. These quirky extravaganzas aren't just about who makes the best coffee. They spotlight the stories and people behind every cup, reaffirming that age-old truth. We're all just looking for that perfect place to connect and share a great brew.
Coffee, the ultimate conduit for culture and connection.
Spot on, Simon. Coffee's the social glue of our time.
But Joe, don't you think these coffee contests are getting a tad overboard? Like, it's cool and all, but some of these barista routines are more elaborate than my Uncle Jerry's wedding. It's a cup of Joe, not a Broadway show. Pretty soon, we'll need playbills just to order a latte. Sure, let's celebrate the craft, but maybe we also need to remember the guy who just wants a solid cup without the fanfare.
I'm waiting for the barista who pulls out a wand and top hat, maybe saws the espresso machine in half, only to reveal the perfect cappuccino. Honestly, Simon, with some of these routines, I wouldn't be surprised if we start scoring them like figure skating. Ah, yes, a triple latte spin followed by a double macchiato axle, perfect form.
You know it's only a matter of time before a barista pulls a rabbit out of a mug instead of a spoon. And folks, if your coffee starts disappearing in a puff of smoke, just remember, that's not caffeine withdrawal. You're just part of the act now.
You've got to love an affogato. It's like the dessert nobody asked for, but everyone didn't know they needed. Who sat there with their espresso and ice cream and thought, yup, let's just pour one on the other, see what happens. Yet it's a hit. It's the rebel of coffee desserts. Part beverage, part sweet treat, and all good. But when they get too fancy, you're left wondering, am I eating this or is it a centerpiece? Keep your 5-tier, gold-dusted, berry-infused showpiece. Give me that good old scoop of vanilla drowning in espresso any day, the delicious originality without the fiasco.
It's like we're always upping the ante with coffee, right? From these high-flying barista shows to the wacky world of coffee desserts. Speaking of which, affogatos, man. This is a classic case of somebody made a whoopsie into an oh yes, it's just coffee and ice cream getting married in a cup. Simple, sweet harmony. But nowadays, you've got versions that seem like they belong in a museum. Talk about a fiasco. What's your take on all these boozy, bacon-topped, unicorn-colored coffee desserts shaking up the scene?
Bacon-topped coffee desserts. Seriously? What's next? A cheeseburger cappuccino? Look, I get the whole sweet meat savory trend, but there's a line, and it's somewhere before you add meat to your mocha. Keep my dessert in a bowl and my coffee on the side, no beef required. Affogato should be a simple pleasure, not a plate of Sunday brunch. Let's tone it down and enjoy the classics for what they are, a delightful duo of espresso and ice cream. Keep the bacon for the breakfast table, unless we're looking to dip it in our cup, and I'm not ready for that world just yet, Simon.
What if we go wild and throw a cheeseburger into the mix with that bacon, right? We'll call it the Affoga to Your Arteries special. But please, let's leave the meat out of our mugs and save room for dessert without the deli. Affogato's identity crisis is turning into an episode of When Food Collides.
Right, so there I was in Italy, the birthplace of espresso. After a day of sightseeing, I found this cozy little cafe tucked away in a side street. Expecting an authentic coffee experience, maybe with a small biscotti on the side, I took a seat. The waiter comes over, and what does he recommend? Not their espresso, not a cappuccino. No, it's their specialty affogato. This thing comes out piled high with all sorts fruits, nuts, even candy floss, like a circus had collided with my coffee. I take one look and burst out laughing because that's the moment I realized we've come full circle. Here I am in Italy, seeking tradition, and get served a dessert looking like a kid raided the sweet shop. I gave it a go, and let me tell you, trying to find the coffee under that mountain felt like an archaeological dig. It was delicious, sure, but sometimes less is more, especially with classics. That affogato was certainly unforgettable, a fiasco of flavors, but a story worth the detour.
A sugar rush excavation, eh? Coffee's hidden treasure hunt.
Affogato or fiasco, the game's afoot. Honestly, Simon, when did coffee become a backdrop for the edible edition of Extreme Makeover? I mean, affogato was that dessert that sneaked up on you at the end of a meal. No fuss, simple, and casually confident in its two-ingredient magic. Now, it's like a foodie Frankenstein with all these add-ons. Sure, a sprinkle of creativity can spice things up, but let's not turn every coffee break into an episode of Chopped. Let the espresso sing. Don't drown it out with the whole grocery list. When my spoon hits more toppings than coffee, we've got to ask, has the affogato lost its soul to the spectacle?
Has it lost its soul? Maybe, but still tasty chaos.
For sure, it's chaos, but at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, is this what we're doing now? We're putting layer upon layer, topping after topping onto something that was perfect in its simplicity. It's like when they start adding all kinds of unnecessary stuff to a perfect fighting technique. Sure, it looks fancy, but does it work better? Nah, the original packed the right punch. Keep it simple, keep it effective. That's what works, man.
Simplicity is king. Let the espresso do the talking, Joe.
Absolutely, let espresso be the star, not the understudy. You know, sometimes I walk into these trendy places and see a deconstructed affogato on the menu, the ice cream on one side, a shot of espresso on another, all served on a wooden plank with a side of instructions. It's like buying furniture from that Swedish store. Suddenly, I'm doing all the work. Dessert shouldn't need an assembly manual. Just give me the classic affogato in one cup. No assembly required, no bells and whistles. Let the harmony of hot coffee melting cold ice cream speak for itself. Simple, but every time it hits the spot. That's the kind of magic you don't mess with, Simon.
Honestly, Joe, with all this coffee talk, it seems we're missing the point of enjoying that morning brew. We've turned a simple pleasure into an over-the-top production. It's high time we step back to those mindful mornings. Just you and your cup, steam rising, flavors hitting without any distractions. No circus acts, no complex rituals. Keep the charm intact. Less glitz, more grit. Because when you strip down all those layers, underneath is just a person and their cherished cup of comfort. Let's not forget the real reason we fell in love with coffee. Brew on, folks. Keep it real.
100% with you. We've been so caught up in the fireworks that we've overlooked coffee's true essence. Starting your day grounded, sipping a humble cup of joe, there's an honesty to it that no amount of flair can replicate. And speaking of mindfulness, it brings me to our next topic, brewing philosophy. Folks, are we forgetting to infuse a little mindfulness into our morning ritual? Instead of going through the motions, consider this. Each step of brewing can be meditative, from grinding the beans to pouring that first cup. Let's bring back the zen to our caffeine routine, one brew at a time. Simon, thoughts on treating our coffee routine as a sort of morning meditation?
Meditative brewing? Yeah, sounds great for some. But honestly, Joe, let's be real. Not everyone's morning allows for that zen moment. Some of us are scrambling out of bed, struggling to become human while multitasking breakfast with a side of email. The only meditation going on is mentally preparing to face the day without spilling hot coffee down our front. It's survival mode till that caffeine kicks in. Mindfulness is a luxury when you've got kids to feed, trains to catch, and snoozed alarms to curse. Sure, mindfulness is cool and all, but let's not kid ourselves. Most mornings are less Zen garden and more relay race.
I hear you, Simon. Not everyone has the luxury of a slow start. And sure, talking about meditative brewing sounds great on paper, but life isn't scripted. Still doesn't mean we can't aim for a slice of that mindfulness pie, no matter how small. Maybe it's just taking a deep breath over that first sip, or pausing for a second to appreciate the aroma. Could be as simple as being present while your machine gurgles away. It's not about carving out hours. It's about those tiny moments where we're actually there with our coffee, not just gulping it down. Think of it like bite-sized meditation. Surely we can all spare a few seconds to just enjoy the brew before the daily grind starts.
Mindfulness? In my coffee routine? Look, the only thing I'm aware of in the morning is not to mix up my coffee scoop with the cat food spoon. That's a whole different kind of awakening, let me tell you.
You know, this reminds me of a morning I had not too long ago. My days are jam-packed from dusk till dawn, always on autopilot, coffee chugged down like it's just another box to tick. So there I was, usual rush, hopping around one-footed trying to get my shoes on, when the inevitable happens. I knock over my mug. Coffee tsunami all over my counter. For once, instead of just cursing the spill and the lost caffeine, it stopped me in my tracks. As I'm sopping up the mess, something clicks. I'm suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The grain of the countertop, the warmth of the coffee puddle, even the sound as the paper towel soaks it up. And then it hit me. That's mindfulness right there, in the middle of chaos. Spurred by that unexpected coffee flood, I realized that these moments don't need to be scheduled. They can catch you unaware, making you take in the here and now, even if it's just for a heartbeat. It wasn't planned or peaceful, but it was a slice of real life, unscripted, messy, and oddly grounding, pun intended. So maybe we can't all sit cross-legged humming on with our brew, but we can find moments of stark awareness, even if it's thanks to a clumsy mishap. Mindfulness might just mean being present through the spills and thrills of regular life, not just when we've got the luxury of quiet.
Mindfulness with my coffee? Sure, I'm fully present every morning, snapping at anyone who talks to me before I've had my first sip. That's some deep meditative grumpiness for you.
Ha! The sacred silence before caffeine. Best meditation there is, Simon.
No talking until after that first cup, Joe. Sacred rule.
You know, Simon, this brings me back to a time when I used to hit the gym early in the morning. One particular day, I got there and realized I'd left my headphones at home. Devastating, right? Normally, those tunes were what got me through the workout. But that day, without my usual playlist pounding in my ears, I found myself really tuning in to the rhythm of my own breathing, the steady thump of my sneakers on the treadmill, even the distant clanking of weights. It wasn't mindfulness by the book. I mean, who finds their zen surrounded by grunting weightlifters and frenzied cardio enthusiasts? But it was mindfulness in motion for me. That unplanned silence was golden. It allowed me to connect with the moment in its rawest form. And it's kind of like our brewing philosophy. If we're willing to bask in the quiet before the caffeine rush, embracing the calm before the daytime storm, we might just find our own version of mindfulness, wherever we are. Whether it's fully appreciating that first sip or simply enjoying the silence, being present can start with something as routine as waiting for your coffee to brew.
Totally, Joe. Unexpected silence can be a game changer. Mindfulness sneaks in when we ditch the distractions. And on that note, speaking of rare additions, let's slide into something that'll sure wake us up more than our morning brew. A talk on those rare finds that send collectors and enthusiasts into a frenzy. Ever stumbled upon a rare gem that sent your heart racing? Whether it's a vinyl, book, or even a limited-run espresso blend, there's nothing quite like snagging that elusive prize. Let's dive into the thrill of the hunt, folks. Treasure could be hiding where you least expect it.
Definitely, Simon. That surprise dose of quiet in a busy gym taught me that mindfulness can be a real trip without the need for any grand setup or perfect scenario. All right, and speaking of unique experiences, let's pivot to those rare additions. You know, it's like hunting for treasure in your own city. You never know what magic you'll find tucked away in some dusty shelf or wedged between two unassuming records. I remember once coming across this first edition Hemingway novel in a used bookstore. My hands were shaking as I gingerly opened the cover, half expecting an alarm to sound or the shopkeeper to suddenly realize their mistake. But nope, there it was, mine for the taking. It's this electric jolt when you discover something scarce and unprecedented, a blend of history, art, and the thrill of possession, all wrapped into one. So folks, what are your stories? Ever come upon something so splendidly rare it made your collector's heart skip a beat? Let's hear about those once-in-a-lifetime finds. Simon, ever had your pulse quicken at the sight of a collector's dream?
Once snagged a vintage Batman comic for $1. Victory.
Oh man, now that's a steal of epic proportions. Scoring an original Batman comic for $1 is the kind of tale that becomes legend in collector circles. It sparks this rush, the kind you get when the universe seems to align just right, sliding a piece of history into your hands for less than the price of a cup of coffee. And it's not always about the monetary value. It's the story, that personal victory, a rare edition, whether it's comics, vinyl, or anything else, connects us to past eras, creators, and the cultural zeitgeist of their time. Simon, you're probably holding on to that comic like it's a holy relic, and rightly so. Finding those gems is more than just luck. It's about being in the moment, aware and ready to spot what many others would overlook. Listeners, whether you're hitting garage sales, estate auctions, or just eyeing the shelves in your local thrift shop, keep your eyes peeled. That rare find could be waiting for you, promising its own adventure and a story you'll tell for years to come. So tell us, where have you found your trophies? What earns a place of pride on your collector's shelf? Let's celebrate the wins and share those quests for the rare and extraordinary.
Joe, you ever think about what it is that makes us treasure these finds? Is it the hunt, the history, or just bragging rights?
It's the personal story each treasure carries for us, Simon.
Totally, Joe. It's the memories attached that make them priceless.
Simon, it's all about that personal narrative. That's the real value. The connection to a moment, to your own experience. That's gold, man.
Oh, Joe, let me drop a quick history bomb on you. Rare editions in the world of collectibles have this allure because they're like a snapshot of the printing press era, back when mistakes or limited runs were more common. A rare edition could be anything from an error on a stamp to a misprint in a comic book, giving it a unique fingerprint. Transitioning into books, first editions are especially prized. Think of them as the rookie card for literary works, an author's initial vision untouched by later edits or revisions. These bits of paper tell stories way beyond the written word. They mark the birth of cultural phenomena, like a first pressing of the Beatles' White Album or a first print Superman comic. It's the thrill of owning a piece of history that fuels collectors. Coming across one isn't just luck, it's a rite of passage.
Simon, speaking of printing press era quirks, what's the most unexpected thing you've come across that turned out to be a collector's jackpot?
Stumbled upon what I thought was a fancy bookend at a yard sale. Turns out it was a misshapen action figure from the 70s. Kid probably buried it and dug it up 10 years later. Called it Rare Earth Element Man. Cha-ching.
Rare Earth Element Man, huh? That's quite the origin story. So how much did that misshapen action figure end up being worth, Simon?
Worth? It's not about the cash. It's the story that's priceless. Who else has a superhero born from backyard archaeology? It's so bizarre. It's almost mythical. And in collector world, that oddball backstory sometimes trumps any price tag, gives Rare Earth Element Man his real superpower, unbeatable character. Now let's flip the script, folks. Anyone else got a find with a crazy tale? The weirder, the better.
You said it, Simon. The misfit toys and oddball memorabilia with wild backstories often overshadow those with a hefty price tag. It's the peculiar tales, the provenance puzzles that make for unforgettable finds and even better stories. Whether it's Rare Earth Element Man or some obscure vinyl record, that unique character becomes legendary lore in our collector's universe. All right, folks, keep chasing those peculiar finds because sometimes the best treasures come with the strangest maps. What's your next discovery going to be? Keep us posted.
No doubt, Joe. The quirkier the backstory, the better. And hey, speaking of strange maps, provenance puzzles are like the escape rooms of the collector's world. You get this old thing and then bam, you're piecing together a story, hunting down its history. It's not just owning an item, it's cracking the code of where it's been, who owned it, and how it ended up in your hands. Let's unravel some mysteries, shall we? Ever had to play detective with something you've collected? The twists and turns in tracking an item's past can be as thrilling as finding the treasure itself.
Absolutely. The hunt for backstory often trumps the find itself.
Yeah, it's the chase that gets your blood pumping.
The thrill of the chase, you can't beat that adrenaline rush.
Provenance puzzles are the unsung heroes of collecting. You're like a detective in an old noir film, trawling through leads. You don't just find something cool, you get to unearth its life story. The crazier, the better, like unraveling a mystery novel page by page. And sometimes, the tale is worth more than the item itself.
Unraveling tales? That's where the true adventure lies, Simon.
Absolutely, it's the story that turns junk into treasure, Joe.
Simon, calling it junk, is underestimating the power of a backstory. But hey, I'll push back on the treasure bit. A story can inflate the value, sure, but sometimes the legend surpasses the actual worth. Imagine selling a beat-up guitar as one that belonged to a music legend. Now that's turning junk into a jackpot based on a tale, and it happens more than you think. Beware of those tall tales in the collecting world. Some stories are just stories. Let's dig deeper, though. Ever found an item where the provenance was actually a wild goose chase?
Yep, bought a vintage vase, tracker's nightmare, turned out to be brand new.
That's a bummer, Simon. It proves my point, though, doesn't it? Provenance puzzles can be double-edged swords. You've got to sift through red herrings and dead ends. A good story adds zest, but a little due diligence goes a long way in separating facts from fiction. It keeps the chase honest, maintaining both the thrill of the hunt and the integrity of collecting. Ever caught a seller spinning a phony backstory? Now that's a detective story twist for you.
You ever nab a seller red-handed spinning yarns about an item's past, Joe?
Oh, definitely, Simon. Caught a guy once trying to sell me a museum-quality piece he claimed was from ancient times, but it didn't take much digging to find out it was made just a few decades ago, somewhere between disco and grunge. When the backstory's fabric is flimsier than a supermarket shopping bag, that's when your inner detective has to pull out the magnifying glass. It's all about doing your homework, or you risk turning your collection into a cabinet of fables.
That's it, Joe. These sellers with their ancient relics probably dug them up right between a garage sale and their backyard. Homework is key. You gotta sniff out the tall tales like a bloodhound. Because honestly, who wants a cabinet of fables when you could have a shelf of genuine, bona fide history? Give me dusty old truth over shiny new fibs any day. You're not just buying something, you're adopting its history. Make sure it's got the right lineage.
Truth over fibs every time. Own the history, not just myths.
So, this one time, I was at a flea market and came across this rustic-looking sign that said Route 66. The seller spun this yarn about it, being an original from the heydays of the American road trip. Got me hooked on how it witnessed the golden age of travel and all that. Truth be told, it looked legit rusty. Bought it feeling like I snagged a slice of Americana. Ends up, after showing off my vintage score, a buddy pointed out the same signs at a craft store. Fresh off the assembly line with faux rust, my legendary piece of Route 66 was more expedited shipping than Mother Road. Goes to show, even the pros can get taken for a ride if they skip the homework.
Ouch, faux rust got you. Crafty sellers out there, Simon.
Ha! You're telling me, Joe. But it's like there's a fine art to seeing through the scam. Like we need a special set of gullibility goggles to filter out the fakes. Honestly, I think sometimes these sellers deserve an award for creativity. We should have a show named Antique Mythbusters. The real puzzle is figuring out where the story's charm ends and the con begins. Makes you wonder how many priceless items are just masterclasses in storytelling.
From faux rust relics to priceless fabrications, the tales behind our treasures are often crafted with more creativity than the items themselves. Whether it's a flea market fumble or an auction house howler, shelved shenanigans could become our new favorite segment, exposing the crafty cons while hunting for the dusty truths tucked away in corners of the collecting world. It's all about keeping those gullibility goggles on tight and our sense of humor even tighter. All right, let's switch gears. Ever wondered why we're drawn to collect things in the first place? What is it about human nature that makes us want to hoard and hold on to stuff? Let's dive into that.
You've got it, Joe. Shelved Shenanigans could be a hit, busting those collecting myths wide open for our listeners. While we're at it, chuckling at the faux pas and dodging the deceit, let's consider that human itch to collect. It's like our brains come with built-in magpie instincts, shiny things, must have. But truly, there's something deeper, right? We crave connections, stories. Each trinket is a time machine to a different era. What compels us to occupy our spaces with these physical echoes of the past, creating personal museums? Is it nostalgia, pride, or maybe a mix? Let's unpack that.
It's like we're wired to seek out these pieces of the past, man. Maybe it's part nostalgia, part identity. This tribal thing where we latch onto artifacts that say something about who we are or who we want to be. It's fascinating, really. There's a whole psychological maze to why we collect, from simple joy to complex historical pursuit. But hey, in the end, whether it's pride, passion, or just plain obsession, these treasures are tokens of our journey, reminders of where we've been and what we dig. Now, what's the weirdest thing you've ever come across at one of those flea markets? Let's hear it, Simon.
Taxidermy frog mariachi band, complete with tiny guitars and maracas.
A taxidermy frog mariachi band? That's gold for our shelved shenanigans. It's zany finds like that which illustrate how rich and wonderfully weird the collecting world is. Imagine the backstory there, hopping from lily pads to leading a fiesta. That's exactly the kind of eccentric history that sticks in someone's collection, not just because it's strange or rare, but because it spins a yarn that's too intriguing to ignore. And honestly, unpacking the quirks of human keepsakes is what gives shelved shenanigans that spice, straight from maracas-wielding frogs to Route 66 signs. What's next on our oddity radar, listeners? Stay tuned and keep those stories coming.
Frogs aside, ever find strange food-themed collectibles?
I do have one, believe it or not. I once stumbled upon an entire set of kitchen canisters designed to look like Campbell's soup cans, a full nod to Warhol right there on your countertop. What took the cake, though, was finding out they were never mass-produced. They were handcrafted by an artist with a flair for pop art and soup. Sifting through history's pantry, it's uncanny what you'll uncover, where food meets art meets function. But there's value in that surprise. Pushes us to embrace the bizarre buffet of collecting. So Simon, ever had an appetite for such kitschy flavors of nostalgia?
Soup cans as canisters? Now that's what I call tasteful art.
Absolutely. Tasteful to a T. But let's put a lid on those soup cans for a sec. Shelved Shenanigans isn't just about the quirky charmers. We've got to remember the absolute head-scratchers, too. The kind that have you thinking less kitchen chic and more what's the shtick. We're talking cheeseburger telephones, Elvis-shaped potato chips. Novelty's one thing, but where's the line, Simon, between collecting and cluttering with random food memorabilia? It begs the question, how zesty does something have to be before it's added to your personal museum of the deliciously odd?
Elvis-shaped potato chips. Now, who's deciding anything with the king's face on it isn't collection gold? But really, there's got to be a line. I reckon novelty runs out of flavor pretty quick when you cross from collector to that person owning the world's largest rubber duck armada. So here's my hot take. The zest factor is measured not in how wacky an item is, but in its ability to capture a story or moment that resonates with someone personally. If your collectible can make someone pause and go, "Wait, why do you have this?" and you've got a tale that gets a laugh or jaw drop, that's museum-worthy in my book.
You've hit the nail, Simon. It's all about the stories and connections, not the clutter. Whether it's attaching to a slice of history or just a laugh-inducing oddity, it's those philosophical bindings that give our collections their true flavor. A rubber duck armada might raise eyebrows, but it's the tale that'll either sink or float it in terms of collectible cred. So folks, gather your items with zest, but anchor them in stories that resonate. Now, let's navigate from curios to cosmic. Have you ever pondered how the sky might look if we could see all the stars, including the ones hidden by light pollution? What a celestial spectacle that would be.
So, while we laugh about rubber ducks and Warhol soup cans, these little tidbits really tie into something bigger. They echo our own tales and lend weight to the wacky. Now let's float from our philosophical pond of possessions right up to the cosmic ocean overhead. Imagine that, if the city lights dimmed and every last twinkle in the universe was visible. It'd be an overwhelming light show, like a sky full of glitter just spilled out. Makes you realize how much is hidden right above us, tucked away behind the curtain of the night.
An epic showcase, Simon. The ultimate star-studded performance, literally.
You think that'd change how we see ourselves, all those stars on full blast?
You're onto something deep, Simon. It's humbling to think about. We're really just tiny parts of a massive cosmic puzzle. If we saw the unfiltered universe night after night, do you think it'd shift our perspective on daily life? Maybe we'd sweat the small stuff less and shoot for the stars more, eh?
Absolutely, Joe. Stardust reality check for Earth's tiny travelers.
Stardust reality check, sure, but think about the flip side. A constant celestial showcase might just become our new normal, and we humans are champs at taking spectacular sights for granted. How long before that boundless canvas of stars becomes just another backdrop? It's one thing for the skies to offer perspective, quite another for us to maintain that sense of amazement. Keeps me wondering if sometimes the mystery behind the curtain is what keeps our imaginations truly alive. What do you think, Simon? Could too much of a cosmic spectacle end up dulling our sense of wonder?
Too many stars? That's like saying you got too much chocolate in your milk. There's no such thing, brother. We'd probably start naming them like pets. Oh, that's Steve. He flickers on every Tuesday.
Ha, classic. Imagine that. Backyard astronomers calling out to their favorite stars. Hey, Steve, looking good tonight. But you're right. Even with an entire galaxy for a nightlight, folks would probably still find the magic in it. There's just something about those distant suns reminding us there's so much more than our little slice of the universe. Makes every problem seem a lot smaller when your night sky neighbor is a few light years away. Now, let's switch gears a bit. How about we dive into the deep end of swimming with sharks? Ever thought about taking the plunge, Simon?
Swimming with sharks. That's a hard pass for me, Joe. Why willingly jump into a finned frenzy when I can stay dry and not risk becoming seafood? Just imagine gulping down that salty water as you stare into the cold, dead eyes of a shark. Hey, nice to meet ya. Now please don't eat ya. No, sir. I'll stick to my philosophical bindings on land. Thank you very much. But hey, while we're on sharp teeth, what about biting into weird food combos? Cheese whiz and jelly sandwiches, anyone?
Philosophical bindings on land, I hear you. But think about it. Diving with sharks, that's the ultimate test of trust and respect for nature's finned enforcers. It's not just about the adrenaline, it's about understanding and coexisting with what scares us. On land, we're too comfy in our control zones. The ocean, that's their turf. It challenges our beliefs about life, risk, and cohabitation with the wild. Speaking of challenging beliefs, let's tear into those odd food combos. Cheese whiz and jelly, a combo that makes your palate pause and brain ponder. Can two totally mismatched flavors tango on the taste buds and actually find harmony? Isn't this the culinary equivalent of philosophical bindings, melding contrasting elements to uncover something unexpectedly profound or profoundly disturbing? What's your take on these flavor experiments, Simon? Culinary courage or just taste bud torture?
Culinary courage all the way. Life's too short for bland.
Speaking of culinary courage and philosophical bindings, you know you've gone too far when your sandwich starts questioning its own existence. To be or not to be eaten, that is the question.
So diving into the whole philosophical take on food, right? It's this wild intersection where taste buds meet brain cells. Think about it. Every bite is like a mini experiment in flavor science. The magic here is all about combinations that probably shouldn't work, yet when they do, it's like your mouth just had a little mind explosion. We're basically talking about pushing culinary boundaries to see how flavors can coexist, sometimes against all logic. It's like those jelly and cheese whiz daredevil duos are saying, hey, forget what you know, let's dance on the edge of tastefulness. That kind of boldness in the kitchen might just be the unsung hero behind your next snack revelation.
Well, Simon, board games have definitely gone through a renaissance. It's not just rolling dice and moving pieces anymore. Modern classics are changing the game, literally. They're engineering social experiences, challenging our strategic thinking, and letting us get lost in rich, imaginative worlds. From deck builders to cooperative quests, these games are tossing out old-school boredom and bringing people of all ages back to the table. Who would have thought cardboard and tokens could bring about such a tabletop revolution? All right, as we're moving pieces and plotting victories on the board, let's talk about orchestrating victories in life. Ever considered using board game tactics in real-world situations, Simon?
Absolutely, Joe. Who knew chits and cards could transform game night into a high-stakes summit of strategy and cooperation? It's like someone injected our childhoods with a shot of Sherlock Holmes-level deduction and Tolkien-equal adventure. You're not just rolling dice, you're leading civilizations, curing global pandemics, heck, sometimes even saving the galaxy. And board game tactics in real-life situations? I call dibs on the resource management skills of Settlers of Catan for my next grocery shop. I'll trade you 3 rolls of this TP for some of those fresh avocados. Now, speaking of this board game renaissance, it's pretty wild how these modern classics have turned a simple hobby into a full-blown cultural wave. Remember when games were basic and the biggest worry was avoiding bankruptcy and monopoly? These days, games are immersive escapades with layers of complexity that mirror epic sagas or battle-based animes. They educate us without even realizing it because we're too busy having fun. This resurgence proves that whether we're crushing orcs or building empires, we're all just looking for a way to connect and challenge ourselves.
Games now are skill building in disguise. Who needs school, right?
I remember this one time. My cousins and I found this dusty old board game in the attic. We had nothing better to do, so we gave it a shot. As we played, something weird happened. We started bartering like Wall Street traders over sheep and wood. By the time we looked up, hours had passed. It was crazy how invested we became in what was essentially a bunch of cardstock and wooden pieces. That afternoon in the attic, it clicked for me. These games are rooted in real-world skills. Negotiation, strategy, critical thinking. We were knee-deep in learning without cracking a book. It's almost like school was hiding out in that box all along. Now, when I see these modern board games with their intricate rules and themes, I think back to that day. For a lot of us, that's where the roots of this board game renaissance really lie. In the unexpected joy of connecting dots between a game and the skills we use in everyday life.
Board games, the stealthy teachers of life wrapped in fun.
Stealthy life lessons? Monopoly's jail just got a whole new meaning.
Right? Best budget management lesson you'll ever get.
Board games aside, what's next for game night? Think we'll eventually move from tabletops to virtual reality escapades.
The board game renaissance has proven that there's a real hunger for hands-on, face-to-face interactions. It's not just about nostalgia. It's about reclaiming those human connections that we've drifted away from in a digital world. Modern games pull us back to the basics of camaraderie and competition, all while flexing our mental muscles. Who knew cardboard could conquer so much?
Nothing beats the thrill of victory across an actual table.
Absolutely, you can't replicate that tension and immediate reaction with screens. But Simon, as you look back at those marathon game sessions, do you find any particular life lessons or skills that have transferred from tabletop triumphs to your daily grind?
Man, if life was like tabletop games, I'd be king of negotiation. What, you're sold out of my favorite chips? Let's talk trade. I'll give you this rubber band and a picture of my dog looking guilty. 3 packs of chips, that's final offer.
King of negotiation, huh? But honestly, Simon, if we went all board game tactics in real life, we'd be drowning in rubber bands and guilty dog pictures. I mean, feel free to haggle at the grocery store, but don't blame me when they start hiding when they see you coming. Now, let's shift gears a bit. What do you think it is about these modern classics that's grabbed everyone by the meeple and won't let go? Maybe it's the escape from our screen-dominated existence, or just the sheer joy of outsmarting friends around a table. What's your take?
Modern classics? They're like the Chuck Norris of board games. Pardon the 80s reference, Joe. You don't just play them, you live them. Folks are tired of swiping and clicking only to zap zombies or crush candy. They're craving something more tangible, you know? It's all about diving into a rich storyline that unfolds with actual human beings, not avatars. Meeple Wars create legends right at your kitchen table. And let's face it, who doesn't love seeing their friends' scheming faces in real-life high def as they betray you over a game of Ticket to Ride? Now, that's entertainment you can't download.
Right, the Chuck Norris effect. So, Simon, when was the last time a digital game gave you that rush of adrenaline like a good old-fashioned tabletop betrayal?
Digital games are cool and all, but they can't touch the rush of a tabletop backstab. Think about it. There's no screen to hide behind when you're pulling off the heist of the century in Clank, or when you plop down that hotel and bankrupt your buddy in Monopoly. That's real drama, real victory, not some pixels on a screen giving you a thumbs up. It's the renaissance of board games that's reminded us what it feels like to be kings and queens of our cardboard domains, face to face with friends.
Face-to-face wins beat virtual victories any day, Simon.
No doubt, in-person gloating just feels so right, Joe.
Yeah, the board game renaissance isn't just about gloating rights. It's a full-on revival of engagement. Games today are intricately designed to lure us into these worlds where every decision thrums with consequence. Hence, they yank us away from screens and plop us smack dab in the middle of a tactile adventure. This resurgence taps into our longing for social interaction and brainy challenges. It reminds us that being present, not just digitally available, is vital for creating real memories. Plus, let's be honest, nothing compares to the satisfaction of seeing your strategy unfold right before your eyes, taking down your opponents one wooden cube at a time.
A wooden cube triumph? Now that's a memory worth keeping.
The sweetest victories are often the simplest.
So, Joe, speaking of simple victories, what's your most memorable win that felt so simple yet so sweet?
Well, Simon, there was this one time, years back, during a heated game of Carcassonne. The board sprawled with cities and cloisters, farmlands stretching everywhere. Everyone seemed so focused on building the biggest castles, all while I, the quiet one, just kept connecting roads, claiming the smallest features. No one noticed until the very end when they did their grand calculations, and there I was with a network of roads worth just enough points to win. It felt like a total turtle and hare moment. Like in this modern board game buzz, it's not always the flashiest moves that win. Sometimes it's about sticking to your path and enjoying the sweet, simple triumph of seeing something through to its unexpected victory.
Tactical mastery in games speaks volumes, Joe. It's not just about owning the flashiest castle or the biggest army. It's the mind games, the subtle strategies, like your brilliant road-building tactics in Carcassonne. Top players wield psychological prowess like a hidden dagger under the table, weaving elaborate narratives, bluffing with a poker face, or just quietly cobbling roads while others duke it out over monuments. It's all about knowing when to be the tortoise in a field of hares, outsmarting without outshouting. And when you pull that off, you're not just playing a game, you're orchestrating an unspoken battle of wits. Speaking of unsung heroes, have you ever noticed how sidekicks in movies often end up being more interesting than the main heroes themselves?
Absolutely. The best players know that victory isn't always loud. It's about outmaneuvering and outsmarting, reading between turns like a silent puppeteer controlling the chaos. Just my style. Speaking of style and unnoticed elements that pack a punch, let's dive into the psychological battlefield in games. Mind games unplugged, psychological tactics among top players. It's clear that mental agility can turn the tide more than sheer force. How many times have we seen a player with average pieces employ such cunning strategies that they dominate? It leads us to wonder, what's more formidable, a well-stocked arsenal or a well-crafted ruse? Simon, how do you see psychology playing a key role in gaming success?
Mind games are the secret sauce in gaming, Joe. It's all mental gymnastics. Forget a stocked arsenal. Give me a player that confuses, befuddles, and outwits opponents with a glare or a well-timed, "Sure, take that piece, I didn't need it anyway." That's gold. You're basically playing chess in their heads. It's about owning the table without making a single move that screams power. While everyone else is flexing their tactical muscles, the real champs are whispering, checkmate, under their breath, 3 moves ahead. Mental agility for the win. It's brains over brawn, every time. And you know what else requires brains? Comedy. Ever play a game just to crack jokes and distract others? Classic maneuver.
Every game night needs a joker to keep things lively.
Ha, totally reminds me of this one time during a game night at my place. Picture it, intense risk session in full swing, right? Armies clashing, friends getting territorial, the usual drill. Every move was like a high-stakes chess game. So there's Dave, always the serious strategist, hunkered down with his grand plans to conquer Asia. And then there was me, chuckling away, throwing out jokes about how Dave's soldiers probably want a vacation by now. But here's the thing. Every chuckle, every joke I tossed out, it wasn't just comic relief. It was strategic warfare in its own right. Those jests, secret weapons. Without anyone catching on, I'd twist them into lighthearted barbs, pointing out oversights, nudging folks to second-guess their alliances. By the end of it, I'd subtly orchestrated a series of events that led to my silent victory in Australia, all while keeping the mood as light as air. Everyone too busy laughing to realize they'd been outplayed, not by an army, but by a court jester with a set of dice and cheeky grin.
That's psychological warfare with a side of comedy, Simon.
Gotta keep 'em laughing on the battlefield, Joe.
You're not wrong. But here's a twist. What if the jokes and laughs aren't just a front? Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy. At least that's what you want them to think, right? It's all about layers, like an onion of deception. Everyone's looking for the angle, the secret plan, but when you're genuinely having fun, it throws them even more. They can't tell if you're a genius or just lucky. And let's be real, they always say laughter is the best medicine. But in gaming, it's the ultimate smokescreen. Sure, make them laugh, but meanwhile, your army silently encroaches territory after territory. It's brilliant because it's simple, effective, and nobody sees through it, until it's too late and you're the last one standing, ruler of the board and mastermind of mirth. Simon, do games bring out the comedian or the strategist in you, or perhaps a cunning fusion of the two?
Both, Joe. Smiles for shields, strategy for the win.
Mind Games Unplugged is an unexplored art form. The tactics we see in games often reflect real-life strategy, where it's less about what you have and more about what people think you have. Top players are adept at using psychology as a tool, weaving a narrative through the game that works to their advantage. It's only partly about the cards you're dealt. It's majorly about how you play your opponents. By incorporating elements of bluffing, baiting, and misdirection, you create an atmosphere where others question not only your moves, but also their own. That uncertainty is a seed you plant in their minds. When it blooms, suddenly they're making mistakes, they're on edge, and you're there reaping the benefits without ever appearing like a threat. Now, comedy adds another layer. Keeping it light while being strategic lets you fly under the radar. But mastering that duality, Simon, is the real trick. Is it better to be feared or loved on the gaming table? I say, why not be both?
Why not, indeed? Best to keep 'em guessing, Joe.
Always keeps the game interesting and lively.
Right, so this one time at a trivia night, we've got teams locked in fierce battle, right? This new team joins, a bunch of folks who aren't known for their trivia skills. Everyone's smirking, thinking they're menu appetizers, easy points. We start playing, and the questions are flying hard and fast. Now I'm on my game, knocking out history and science like it's nobody's business. But then there's this new team, just having a blast. They're throwing out the wildest guesses with such confidence, everyone starts to sweat. Are they clueless or clairvoyant? By the end, we're all overanalyzing our answers, second-guessing ourselves because, hey, if these happy-go-lucky folks are on such a roll, maybe we should be rethinking things too. Turns out they were just really good at reading the room, playing off our doubts. Sure, they didn't win, but they came shockingly close, proving that sometimes you don't need to know all the answers, just how to get into your opponent's heads and mix it up. Now that, my friend, is psychological gameplay at its finest.
Board game bloopers are the secret sauce of any tournament. They humanize the strategists, add levity to the tension, and remind us why we play. for those unforgettable moments that leave everyone in stitches. Whether it's an overconfident trivia team or a comedic strategist in Risk, these mishaps flip the script, showing that sometimes the best moves come wrapped in laughter. It's not just about winning, it's about creating stories we'll retell for years. What's your favorite board game blooper, Simon?
Totally with you on that. Bloopers keep the game alive and kicking, Joe. Like this one time, I was playing Monopoly with a group that took it way too seriously. I'm talking calculations, alliances, the whole 9 yards. Mid-game, a buddy landed on my hotel-loaded property, could have sworn he was about to flip the board. Instead, his elbow sent the dice flying into the ventilation. We spent an hour trying to fish them out, laughing till we cried. It's the goofs that really stick with us long after the winner's forgotten, right? They turn a regular old game into legend. Hilarious mishaps during tournaments have got to be the spice of every game night. They bring us together in ways strategic genius just can't compete with. Let's chat more about those board game blunders. What makes them so memorable and downright ridiculous?
Goofs turn game night legends, shared laughter's unbeatable glue, Simon.
Yeah, Joe, board game bloopers are, without a doubt, the cherry on top of game night. Take the classic Dice in the Vent fiasco. It turned into an epic rescue mission that's now part of our group's folklore. Or how about when Sally was so excited to finally buy Park Place, she throws her cash in the air like she's making it rain, only for a gust from the fan to send it all flying. These moments, they're pure gold. They bind us tighter than a full house in Catan. It's not just about rolling dice or drawing cards. It's the unexpected laughs that come from the mess-ups, the oversights. That's what really makes game nights special. Years down the line, you won't remember who bankrupted who, but you'll be talking about Steve's comedic timing when his token took a dive off the table. You just can't plan this stuff. And that's what's so brilliant about it.
Memories made from mayhem. That's game night gold, Simon.
Absolutely, Joe. It's the mess-ups that make the memories.
So, Simon, got any fresh board game blooper stories on deck from recent game nights?
Funny you should ask, Joe. Just the other day, my friends and I dusted off some old board games. We got super into this intense match of Operation. You know, the one where you need a surgeon's steady hand? So there's Rick, all serious, squinting like a hawk, tweezers poised, absolutely nailing it, until his phone blasts the cheesiest 80s ringtone. Guy jumps a mile high, game pieces flying everywhere. His girlfriend called it the best possible moment. It was so perfectly timed, you'd think we planned it as a trap. Every time someone mentions Operation now, we just lose it. And Rick, poor guy, he can't even look at a pair of tweezers without turning red. Just goes to show, sometimes the universe conspires to deliver those epic board game blooper moments.
Ah, the classic ringtone heart attack. Never gets old, Simon.
Total classic, Joe. The unsung heroes of board game chaos.
When you think about it, Simon, board game bloopers are more than just funny stories. They reveal character under pressure. Some freeze, some crack up. At tournaments, high stakes amp that effect. Say a blooper throws off Mr. Strategy, and suddenly he can't see 3 moves ahead anymore. That's when the wildcard player might shine. It really flips the script on who's got the edge, adds an extra layer to every roll, draw, or bid. It's raw, it's real, and it keeps us all coming back for more. What kind of chaos do you think peaks at these game days?
Total underdogs taking the win. That's peak game day chaos.
Speaking of underdogs, Simon reminds me of a Scrabble tournament I attended. There's this quiet kid at the corner table, kind of fading into the background. Seasoned pros are scoffing at his amateur vibe. As the tiles start clacking, he's lagging, letters piling up with nowhere to go. But then, boom, in one turn he slaps down a word so obscure it sends judges scurrying for the dictionary. Turns out to be legit and high scoring. This kid leaps from 0 to hero in seconds, and you can just see the disbelief ripple through the room. From that moment on, everyone's strategy went out the window. They're all playing defense against this unexpected genius. Just goes to show, mishaps aren't always missteps. Sometimes they're just the prelude to a spectacular upset.
You ever see a kid spell quixotic in Scrabble and think he's asking for extra guac at Chipotle?
Haha, quixotic instead of extra guac. That's one for the books. Now let's wrap up. In the zen of board gaming, perhaps rolling dice does shape our fate, in the game and beyond. It teaches us that sometimes taking a non-traditional route pays off, and how to adapt when chaos throws a wrench in our plans. Whether it's the perfect word drop or an out-of-left-field victory, these moments challenge our perceptions of skill and luck. They remind us that control is often just an illusion, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. Embracing the unpredictability can turn any player into the hero of game night. Keep rolling, keep adapting, and who knows? Fate might just be on your side. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Stick around for more candid insights next time on Infinite Podcast.
For sure, Joe. The roll of the dice sets the stage for those wild rides of fate we're talking about. In the end, it's not just about strategy, but how we dance with chance when it steps on our toes. Now, folks, shifting gears to a more contemplative track, the zen of board gaming. Rolling dice isn't just about moving pieces on a board. It's like life, huh? You can have all the plans in the world, but then fate comes along, shaking things up. It teaches us about random twists, about rolling with what you get. But here's a thought. Does this chunk of plastic bouncing across the table actually have anything to do with shaping our fate, or is it just practice for the big game of life where the stakes are real? Tune in and find out as we roll into this paradox of predestination and picking your plays. Do we make our own luck, or is it all in the wrist? Let's talk serendipity and skill in the mystical realm of board gaming right after this break. Stick around.
Is luck made,